Let's look at the flow of the mind and the flow of the swords. When you get the Ace of Swords, again, it is like those cartoons that have that little bubble over the cartoon's head, and it has a little light bulb in it that's gone off. I like to think of the Ace of Swords that way. It is the ignition of an idea, a thought whose time has come. So you suddenly go, oh my gosh, that's the thought, that's the idea. But as soon as you get a new idea or a new thought, you will have to actually start to either rearrange your thoughts, or you will have to discard some thoughts, or you will have to let go of some old beliefs or perspectives. From there, you go to the Two of Swords, which is the Peace card. And the mind, when it understands something, it definitely calms down. It relaxes, it struggles less. It's why in the metaphysical world, so many times people need a ton of books and knowledge and information and reading and classes before they're actually willing to have experiential knowledge and integrate the knowledge into their body in the form of wisdom. So it's really essential sometimes to give the mind information so that it can get the mind from resisting and get it out of the way, so you will finally be able to have an experience. Then you go to the Three of Swords, which is the Sorrow card. And the Sorrow card says, inevitably with any thought or belief, you will hit a snag or a glitch. And when something is out of sync with the pattern, the mind will get really agitated, frustrated, and sad. And so a lot of times people don't want to express emotion, and so they will not get angry. They're afraid to get angry, but they will allow themselves to feel depressed. And so sorrow is the result. It's interesting that Aleister Crowley makes sorrow a mental card, a mental condition, rather than an emotional condition, because he believes that it is your thoughts that cause depression, because when you don't get your picture, you don't get your dream, you don't get what you think you're supposed to get, you will fall into a state of depression, sorrow, sadness, and grief. When your external reality no longer matches your internal belief systems, it causes sorrow. Once you work through sorrow, you get to the Truce card, which is the Four of Swords. And with this card, you finally release the sorrow, you find a way to come back to center, come back to balance, find a better way to regroup so that you understand things, and then naturally there is a state of a truce that, like, okay, I still have my beliefs, but I have maybe a modified belief, perhaps a more balanced belief. But inevitably in the game of the mind, that the mind will always take pot shots at you. So one of my teachers used to say that if your mind can tell you that you're the smartest person in the world, and that succeeds in demoralizing you because then you get an overinflated ego and you can't possibly reach this overinflated goal, you'll collapse and then the ego mind wins. But just the same, your mind can also tell you that you're worthless and that you are never going to succeed. And if that is the consistent choice to undermine you so you don't ever try something new or step into your potential, then it also wins that way. So with the Defeat card, it's always about what your mind is saying, what other people are saying to you, how negative thought viruses can come in and invade your mind and create a state of defeat and loss. Inevitably, when someone's taken some pot shots at you, you get yourself together again and you say, well, I'm just going to go take a class. I'm going to learn more. I need to have more information. I need to study more. And so you go back to school. And so you've got the Six of Swords, which is the science card, and you want to learn, you want to understand, you want to know, you want to be able to make sense out of your reality. But of course, You find out that the more knowledge you have, the more knowledge you realize that you need to have. And then you realize there's so much information out there that there's no way you can possibly become the expert on anything. And it causes your mind to go into a state of futility. So I want to state right here that especially in our culture at this time, most people have done specialties, that you can't possibly know everything about every subject. It would completely overwhelm you. And so what happens is these days people have specialties. But needless to say, there's a part of us that thinks we need to understand everything, but it's sort of a hopeless endeavor. And when your mind recognizes the hopelessness of that, it tends to collapse and feel futile. Then you go to the Eight of Swords. And the Eight of Swords says, well, since I can't know everything, then I'm just going to distract myself. I'm going to waste energy in certain details and neglect other important things, and I'm just going to get distracted, and I'm going to just accept the fact that there's always going to be this constant interference, and I'm never going to be able to write that book, or I'm never going to be able to get that project done because I'm just too busy. And that becomes the mind's way to not step up, not contribute to the manifestation that you're trying to create. And that is the Eight of Swords. When you allow that to get out of control, then you go to the Cruelty card, which is the Nine of Swords. And the Cruelty card says now all of the sorrow and all of the sadness and all of the despair is become so overwhelming that instead you want to get angry at others. And so you either attack yourself and will sacrifice yourself, or you'll have a tendency to collapse, or you'll have a tendency to get angry and violent and lash out at others with what you do know. So they say a little knowledge is a dangerous thing, that we can absolutely manipulate other people with our knowledge or try to make them believe what we believe, even if that is hurting them. So that is the Cruelty card. And then we go to the Ten of Swords. And the Ten of Swords is total ruin. It is, your reasoning and your reality are completely not in alignment. That at this point, you either have to break down or break through. I've noticed with people and clients that I've had that I don't think a nervous breakdown is a nervous breakdown. I think it's an ego breakdown. And the ego especially likes to use the mind and the swords as its weapon. So sometimes you have to have like emotional breakdowns, ego breakdowns, in order for you to dispel your most cherished illusions and thoughts, and so that you can actually get back to square one and rebuild your beliefs and your structure. But when you get this card, you are sometimes tending to fight completely unreasonably to validate what you believe is true, regardless of what is being presented in front of you. So this is a card of delusion and a card of insanity. And so when, again, you get this going too far, it'll collapse, it'll break down, and it'll take you back to the Ace of Swords, where you have to begin again with new ideas in the mind.